guys, in this video I want to talk to you about how Vienna Ensemble Pro is incorporated into OTR. If you're familiar with Vienna Ensemble Pro, you know that when you place the Vienna Ensemble Pro plugin on the track, you're actually not hosting the contact instance or whatever sampler that you're using. You're not actually hosting that on the track or within the DAW. What you're actually doing is telling that particular track with the Vienna Ensemble plugin that you're connecting to a server that will have that plugin. So you could have your contact instrument on a completely different computer if you want. It could be on the same computer, but it's still not being run inside of VEPro. So that opens up a lot of great possibilities for composers, especially since they tend to have the most instruments spread out. But what it can do is cause some confusion with how a track is set up when you just visually glance at it. So the goal with OTR is to make sure that you have the quickest observation as to what's going on, be able to survey the landscape of your tracks, your sections, and you're able to just click a button to do things like render stems as quickly as possible. So if you notice the tracks that I have on the screen right now, these are all locally hosted plugins. And that's okay for this demonstration. But what we've got on the screen, you'll see that they have these little green icons next to them. These indicate that the plugins on the track are actually active. So for example, if I hit on Mac option D, you'll see that I have now have a disabled icon, and you'll notice that the track in the top left corner is actually disabled. That turns the plugin off. It doesn't just bypass it, turns it off and removes it from RAM. So if you were using a lot of software instruments and you say don't have a tremendous amount of RAM, or even if you have a lot of RAM, you could still be using or need more. So what you can do is you can actually disable your track and it will free up your RAM. If we enable it, it turns back green. If we were to freeze the track, all right, so freezing the track allows us to basically remove the plugin, and it renders it to an audio file. So that's another option. Even so, you're still seeing that we now have a frozen icon, active icon, and we have a disabled icon. So we can hit the unfreeze button and we're back to active. What OTR has incorporated is if we were to host this on a Vienna Ensemble Pro server, there's not a way for you to necessarily know that it's hosted on Vienna Ensemble Pro unless you click on it and you go into the plugin itself and see what's set up. It would be nice to know if among these instruments, which of these guys were on a Vienna Ensemble Pro server. So again, in this particular example, I am not actually hosting them on Vienna Ensemble Pro. And that's important because it's easy to show you how what we're about to do does not have any influence on the server itself. What we're about to do is based off of just pure visual representations of the tracks. So if we wanted to say, if we knew these first, for example, these first two tracks are on a Vienna Ensemble Pro server, if we right click on it, we can hit change Vienna Ensemble Pro server assignment. This is new. This was added in OTR version 2.1. And so if we click over here, we can go ahead and choose a server up to server 16, or we can choose a generic. Now, if we choose generic, it's going to ask, is the Vienna Ensemble Pro instance in an enabled state, meaning is it not disabled, and it gives each track. It's going to ask for each of these tracks. The reason it's asking is because your actual instance on Vienna Ensemble Pro can be disabled and it can be enabled. And there is actually no way to know in this moment if it is or isn't. So you just have to tell it. And it's going to change the icon based on that. So assuming that they're both enabled, we're going to hit yes. And you'll see that we now have these new icons, Vienna Ensemble, and they're green. So if you see these green VE icons, they basically mean the same thing as the green icons here. And if we hit the disabled button, we can now see that we have a gray icon, which is really cool. So now we know we have this hosted on a Vienna Ensemble server. Now, if you, again, have a big setup, this is already an awesome feature for anyone who uses Vienna Ensemble Pro. It helps you know which plugins are hosted locally and which are hosted on the server. So for example, Damage 2, it's an instrument in Contact. That particular instrument is really difficult to use in a Vienna Ensemble server situation because it requires a lot of customization each time you use it. So Damage 2 may be something that you actually want to have hosted locally. But say your string library, which is set up exactly the same every single time you compose, that can be hosted on a Vienna Ensemble Pro server and done so in a way that's really elegant behind the scenes. If you put it on a completely different computer, it's no longer taking up your RAM. It's no longer taking up your resources. So you get the idea. But it's really good to know how these tracks are connected. We can also take an instance, and let's say this third instrument here, let's say that we wanted to put this on a Vienna Ensemble Pro server, but let's say it's in a disabled state. So OTR introduces some new icons in this particular version, in version 2.1 and moving forward. You'll see that this has an orange icon. Orange has not been used within OTR at all. What happens in this particular case is if I were to disable the track, you're going to see that it goes to a gold icon. Okay, those are two new icons. Let's enable it. So I just did the actual enable, so that will take it back to active. We have active, again, in orange. We have disabled in gold, and we have disabled. Hold on, let's see, active, and then we have disabled in gray. All right, so what you're seeing is these different variations. Now, what has happened is when we selected from the very beginning the server assignment, and we said that, oh, hold on. When we selected the server assignment and chose generic, so let's go back and reset this. So in the very beginning, when we reset the server assignment and we chose generic, it asked us, is it disabled or enabled? When we told it no, we were telling it that it was disabled. So OTR's new icons basically indicate whether your track has active plugins, which would be green, active instrument, but the Vienna Ensemble Pro instance is disabled on the server, which is orange, which means if you were to play something, you wouldn't get sounds. You have disabled, which is gray, basically means the plugin is disabled. And if you do the disabled if you disable the track and the instance is disabled on the server, then you wind up with this gold icon. So all that is really cool. It basically gives you the idea, it gives you the complete visual awareness as to what's going on with the server. Now, one of the things you'll notice in this example is that I was flipping through all these icons and we're not connected to a Vienna Ensemble Pro server. That's super important in this example because these icons are visual representations. Behind the scenes, there's some other things going on. If you are using BOEM and you, for example, use your disable shortcut, it's going to make sure it sends CC118 to make sure the instance is disabled. If you are in a disabled state right here, this gold cream color state, if you're in this color state, it means your track is disabled, all your plugins are disabled, and your instance is disabled, right? But say you wanted to activate it and also activate the instance on the Vienna Ensemble Pro server. When we hit the normal activate command, it changes the icon, but it also triggers, if you're using BOEM, it also triggers the right MIDI event, which will then raise the instance and enable it on the Vienna Ensemble Pro server. So what I'm trying to explain to you is that we have a number of options here that allow for you to visually see how your instance is set up on the server and how it's represented in the actual DAW. Now, one other thing that we can do here is that if we wanted to freeze a track and we wanted to freeze it but disable the track, we can do something that we haven't been able to do in any DAW before. And so this is using the BOEM layer. If I hit the modifier keyboard shortcut, and all this is in the manual, but the modifier is basically any of your activate, deactivate, freeze, and unfreeze commands. If you use on a Mac keyboard the control button with it, so you add one more button to the shortcut, you're basically telling whatever's on the Vienna Ensemble Pro server to disable itself. So if we were to freeze, the normal command would be Option F of this particular track. But if we wanted it to be disabled on the Vienna Ensemble Pro server, we could hit Option Control F. And when we do so, this is going to introduce something very new to OTR. So this problem out, and this is intentional, what I'm showing you, is that this requires an OTR 2.1 template. And so it's going to tell you how you have to quickly convert this template to 2.1. The reason is that what we want to do with a freeze track is that we actually want, and it just froze it like normal. So we're going to unfreeze it. What we want to have happen is that we want CC118 to be sent to the Vienna Ensemble Pro server. We got around this with a really cool feature. What I'm doing in this particular case is I'm going to, when it freezes a track, it basically plays the track. And so what we're going to do is play the track, and then at the end of it, insert a CC118 MIDI event. So it reads it, disables the track, and life is all good. You can't disable the instance on Vienna Ensemble Pro before you freeze it. You have to freeze it and disable it all at once. So the way that we get around that is by having an OTR 2.1 template. If we go ahead and click the OTR preferences button, and so what it does is it actually adds, when you upgrade to an OTR 2.1 project, it adds a couple MIDI items at the very top of the project. And one of these is a Vienna Ensemble Pro disable item. Now, when you set up your templates, you can come into this MIDI item and you can make sure that you change all of these guys that say 118. You can change it to whatever you're using for your particular command on Vienna Ensemble Pro to disable your instance. OTR uses CC118. Again, path of least resistance, I would leave it there, but this is basically the default MIDI instance. So these get stuffed at the front of every OTR project. And what's going to happen is when we go to freeze this track, it's actually going to copy that instance and put it at the end of the track and then freeze it. So if I hit Command Option F, you saw it briefly place that MIDI track at the end, then it froze it and it would have disabled it. Now this introduces a new color on the track. Earlier, let me go back and activate this. Earlier when we froze a track, you'll see that it turns the icon blue. In this particular case, it turns it like an icy purple color. And the icy purple color means that not only is it frozen and you're unloaded from RAM, but it's also disabled on the, that Vienna Ensemble Pro instance is disabled. So that's really cool. When we unfreeze the track, we can unfreeze it and make the instance active. We can unfreeze it and keep the instance disabled. We have a lot of options by using that regular command. I'm just going to unfreeze it regularly, and it would just come back to an active state. All right, so you see how the icons work. Again, I intentionally have not linked this to a Vienna Ensemble Pro server, just because I want to show you the icons and to show you that they are not connected to telling Vienna Ensemble Pro what's going on. It will trigger with BOEM CC118 and it will all work. And I'm going to walk through that in another tutorial. But these are just icons representing the servers. The other thing that it will do is, all right, so I'm going to freeze this one more time just to give us some variation of colors on the screen. So one of the other things we can do is when we change servers, we can go ahead and change the server assignment to like server 2, server 3, whatever. We have up to 16 servers, right? And each icon is going to go ahead and appropriately pick the right color and whatever it needs to do visually to keep the the right awareness of what's going on with the track. So depending on how many servers you have, the icons now compensate for it. We can move these icons back to a generic state, and they will always, like I said, keep track of the current state. So this was frozen, so it's going to, with a disabled color. So we're going to constantly keep that. If you want to revert this back to a regular instrument track, you just click on remove VEPro assignment. Boom, there you go. Now when we unfreeze this, it's still going to remove the CC event at the end. So everything still functions as you would expect. It just, at this case, it has a visual indicator saying it's like an active track. So I hope this helps, hope this makes sense, but this workflow enhancement is huge to Vienna Ensemble Pro workflows. I know with my personal template, it helps tremendously. I'm going to click over here and just kind of show you how this looks. So this is it's a disconnected instance. So nothing is currently connected in this particular template to the servers. I have these set up where I've got all my instances mapped out. And then on my connected template, it will show you which server each of these instruments are connected to. So because I've got so many instruments, it helps me to know where they are. And then some of these instruments I've got loaded locally. So for example, all the synths loaded locally, right? Like I'm going to make a lot of changes in each of those for each project. Again, this is not my project workflow overview video, but I'm showing you how it can be very beneficial. So keep that in mind. Again, use your OTR 2.1 template to make full advantage of it. Use BOEM to take full advantage of it, but basically the right-click menu to reassign your server is going to be huge in understanding what's going on with your Vienna Ensemble Pro instances. So I hope this helps you a lot. I know it's been huge for me. Thanks for watching.